The first time I really looked at her, she had sawdust in her hair and didn't know it. I'd been renting the apartment over her workshop for 6 weeks, and in that time we traded maybe a dozen sentences. Mail slipped under the wrong door, a complaint about my music, a nod on the stairs. Small things. Nothing that should have stayed with me the way they did. That afternoon, I came down to ask about a leak in my ceiling and found her hunched over a chair frame, sanding block moving in slow, even strokes, like she wasn't in a hurry to be anywhere else. The radio was on low. She didn't hear me at first. "You're doing that wrong," I said, before I could stop myself. "I don't know the first thing about furniture." She looked up, not startled, just amused, like she'd been waiting for someone to say something stupid so she'd have a reason to laugh. "Is that so? I have no idea what I'm talking about." "I know." She went back to sanding. But she was smiling at the wood now, not at me, and somehow that was worse. Better. I don't know which. I told her about the leak. She said she'd look at it Thursday. I said okay, and didn't leave. There was a pause then, the kind that goes on a beat too long, where neither of you is saying anything and both of you know it. She had a thin gold band on her left hand that she kept turning without seeming to notice. I noticed. I went back upstairs and sat with my ceiling leak and thought about her hands for longer than any reasonable man thinks about a woman he's spoken to 12 times. Thursday came with rain, and she showed up at my door in a flannel shirt with paint on the cuffs, toolbox in one hand, apology already halfway out of her mouth. "Sorry, I would have called, but I don't have your number." "You could get it." She gave me a look like I had said something faintly ridiculous and stepped past me into the apartment. The leak turned out to be worse than either of us expected, water stains spreading across the ceiling like a bruise, and she ended up staying almost 2 hours tarping the spot, muttering to herself about the landlord who never fixed anything right the first time. I made coffee. I wasn't sure she'd drink. She drank it. Didn't say thank you, exactly, just wrapped both hands around the mug like she was cold, even though it wasn't cold. "You don't have to help me with this," I said. "This isn't really your job." "No," she agreed, and didn't explain further. Just kept working. I watched her hands more than I meant to, steady, sure of themselves, until she went to move the ladder, and it caught wrong and she flinched, quiet, holding her wrist for a second before shaking it out like nothing happened. "You okay?" "Fine." Too fast. She caught herself, softened it. "Old injury. It complains when it rains." I didn't ask. She looked like someone who'd answer if I did, and also like someone who'd rather I didn't, and I was starting to understand that with her those two things could be true at once. When she finally packed up to leave, she paused at the door, hand on the frame, not quite looking at me. "Thanks for the coffee," she said. Then quieter. "It's been a while since anyone made me one." She left before I could ask what she meant by that. The power went out on a Tuesday, the whole block dark at once, and I found myself downstairs with a flashlight I didn't need an excuse to bring, but I brought one anyway, said something about checking if her breaker was the same as mine. She was already lighting candles when I got there, unbothered, like blackouts were just another Tuesday. "Storm's supposed to last till morning," she said. "You can wait it out here if your place is worse than mine." It wasn't. I stayed anyway. We ended up on opposite ends of her couch, a candle between us on the table, rain going hard against the windows. She told me about the shop. Her father's, before it was hers, how she used to hide under the workbench as a kid and listen to him talk to the wood like it could hear him. I told her about nothing important. She listened like it was important anyway. Her phone lit up twice. She turned it face down both times without looking at it. "You're not going to check that?" "No." Flat. Final. Then softer, like she was correcting course. "It's nothing." I didn't push. But something in the way she said nothing sat wrong, the word too careful, like she'd practiced saying it. At some point the rain slowed and the silence between us got easier to sit in and to fill, and she was close enough that I could see the candlelight moving on her face, the tired lines in her eyes, the wedding band she still hadn't stopped turning. "You should go up before your flashlight dies," she said, not moving. "Probably," I said, not moving either. Neither of us did, for one more second, long enough to feel like a decision, before she stood first, breaking it, and handed me a candle for the stairs. I found the voicemail by accident, not hers, mine, from a night I don't remember making the call. 3 a.m, for days after the blackout, and there was a message sitting in my outbox to her number, one I didn't send on purpose and definitely didn't remember dialing. 19 seconds long. I never listened to it. I just stared at the timestamp until it stopped meaning anything. I went down the next evening to tell her, or maybe to apologize, or maybe just to see her. I hadn't sorted out which, and found her sitting on the back step of the shop with the shutter half down, not working, which she never did. Just sitting. "I called you last night," I said. "I don't know why. I didn't mean to." She didn't ask what I said. She didn't ask anything. She just looked at me for a long moment, the kind of look that isn't reading your face so much as deciding what to do with it. "What are we doing?" she said finally. Not sharp. Tired. "I don't know." That's not an answer. "It's the only one I've got." She laughed, short, no humor in it, and pressed the heel of her hand against her eye like she was pushing something back. "I'm 46 years old. I have a husband who doesn't come home before 10, and I have a 19-year-old sounding voicemail I haven't deleted, and I don't." She stopped herself. Started again, quieter. "I don't know what you want from me. I don't want anything from you. That's the problem," she said. "I think I might want something from you." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at her hands instead, like they were the ones who'd spoken. She invited me in that night instead of sending me back upstairs, which she'd never done, and I sat at her kitchen table while she made tea neither of us drank, and somewhere in the second hour of talking around things, she told me about a photograph. There was someone, A long time ago, she said, turning her mug in a slow circle. Before my husband. I was 23. He was. She stopped, recalculated. It doesn't matter what he was. What matters is I had a chance to go somewhere with him. Actually go, and I didn't take it. I stayed because staying felt safer, and I told myself safer was smarter. And I've spent 20 years being smart about it. What happened to him? I don't know. That's the part one hates most. I didn't even get an ending. Just a door I didn't walk through, and it closed on its own eventually. She looked up at me then, and something in her face shifted, like she'd caught herself in the middle of a thought she hadn't meant to have out loud. You have the same way of listening he did. Like you're not waiting for your turn to talk. I didn't know what to do with that, being compared to a ghost, being told I resembled someone's unlit life, except that it didn't feel like an insult. It felt like she'd handed me something breakable and was watching to see if I'd drop it. I'm not him, I said. I know. Quiet. Certain. That's what scares me. She reached over and moved my mug an inch, for no reason, just to have somewhere to put her hand that wasn't near mine, and I understood, watching her do it, that the distance she was keeping cost her something to maintain. There was a dog on her step the next morning. Not hers, not mine, some rain-soaked mug with no collar that had apparently decided her doorway was as good a place as any to wait out being lost. And she was crouched down feeding it something from her own breakfast when I came down, and for a second I just stood there watching her talk to it in the same low voice she used on stubborn hinges. Found family, she said, not looking up. Or he found me. Same thing, I guess. I sat down on the step next to her. Neither of us mentioned the dog again after that. I talked to my husband last night, she said eventually. Really talked. First time in longer than I want to admit. What did you say? Not about you. About me. About how long I've been somewhere without actually being there. Okay. But I'm not staying the way I was either. That much I know. We sat like that a while, the dog settling between our feet like it had always belonged there. The morning going from gray to something with a little more light in it. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't reach for hers. At some point her shoulder came to rest against mine, small, almost accidental, and stayed there. I'm not going to apologize for this, she said, quiet, more to herself than to me. Whatever this is. You don't have to. She let out a breath, like she'd been holding it for 6 months. Good, she said. Neither will I. The dog stayed. We never did find out whose he was. Or maybe he was always meant to be nobody's until he wasn't. It's been 8 months since the blackout, since the voicemail I never sent on purpose, since a woman with sawdust in her hair looked up at me like she'd been waiting for someone to say something stupid. Things didn't resolve the way stories usually promise they will. She's still married, separated now, in the slow, unglamorous way that takes lawyers and time instead of dramatic exits. I still live upstairs, though we both know that won't be true forever. What changed wasn't the situation so much as the honesty in it. She doesn't turn her ring anymore. She doesn't wear it. She laughs easier at things that aren't even funny, like she's been saving it up. I stopped watching her from a distance and started just being in the room, which turned out to be the harder, better thing. I used to think love was supposed to announce itself, some unmistakable moment you could point to later and say that's when it happened. Ours never did that. It just kept showing up quietly, in coffee mugs and candlelight, and a stray dog that decided we were worth staying for. Until one day I realized I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was just with her. She still stands with like she's not in a hurry to be anywhere else. I still don't know the first thing about furniture. Some things didn't need to change. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?